White Supremacy and the Unite the Right protest/march, Charlottesville, Virginia, August 16th, 2017, by David Abraxas. Unite the Right protest march, University of Virginia campus, Charlottesville, Virginia, Saturday, 12 August 2017. Quote, "There is nothing more terrible than a class of barbarian slaves who have learned to regard their existence as an injustice and now prepare to avenge not only themselves, but all generations." Friedrich Nietzsche. Never in my avowed vocation and life's work of chronicling human ignorance, stupidity, cowardice, dishonesty, and overall bullshit have I seen a bigger pile of bullshit and nonsense than the reportage in the news, all the news, including citizen journalists posting interviews and videos on YouTube and other internet sites regarding what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia the day before yesterday. The main march and protest by Unite the Right was not a protest in favor of white nationalism or white supremacy. It was a protest against white genocide and the organized, well-funded, and well-armed programs aiming to destroy European civilization, of which the immigration movement and the removal movement are key stages and strategies. I'm referring to the proponents and funding supporters of this true conspiracy, which include but are not limited to George Soros. The lies about the main march, not the two other earlier protests by avowed KKKers and Nazis, having anything directly to do with white supremacy, were due to the idiot media's conflation of the three events, of course, to get attention and sell advertising time, as are all of these creatures' motivations. The marchers never mentioned white supremacy or even white nationalism. This was all injected into the events by journalists, quote unquote, and the disgusting American establishment, which includes the American people who are eager to believe whatever the establishment elites tell them to believe, for their own personal and group aggrandizement. The chant of the main marchers can be seen and heard in the Honest videos. Their main chant as they marched to the protest site of Lee's Park, named after Confederate General Robert E. Lee, was, "You will not replace us. You will not replace us." Because what is happening in this country and throughout this civilization is what French writer Renaud Camus and many other thinkers and writers who you will never hear from or about because of, you guessed it, establishmentarian control of the wire services and news reporting corporate conglomerates, has referred to as the Great Replacement, referring to what many in our civilization consider the purpose of the forced mass immigration into Western societies, into Western countries by non-Caucasian, non-European migrants fleeing failed states and failed societies in Asia, Africa, Central and South America, and the Third World in general, which are aimed ultimately at intermixing Caucasians out of existence. This is being forced on Western societies without any input from or approval by the majorities of people in any of these democracies, quote unquote. Not only have the people not been asked whether they want this mass influx into their nation states, but most have already complained emphatically that they do not want this mass influx and have obviously been ignored. The ones who haven't been ignored are in Hungary, Britain, Greece, and a few other European nations. Initially, the Unite the Right marchers were protesting against actions around the nation perpetrated by the removal movement, who are endeavoring to remove statues, monuments, names, titles, words, ideas, concepts, in a true fulfillment of George Orwell's predictions about how a relatively healthy, sane society will be reduced via a series of freedom-curtailing steps into totalitarian dictatorship, and that some subsegments of the population have complained are offensive or hurt people's feelings. This removal movement is a hyped-up, hysterical, and borderline personality disordered extension of political correctness movement, which was already a hyped-up, hysterical, and psychotic initiative to begin with. The removal movement and enforcers of political correctness, conformity mandates, are both expressions of what certain 20th century philosophers have termed ressentiment. This term is a French version of our term resentment, but relates much deeper, more profound, but more ominous implications. The term suggests feelings of envy and jealousy of other persons or nations, concepts, or institutions on the part of other disturbed persons who suffer from such deep-seated feelings of inferiority and worthlessness in the face of the objects of their envy that they are motivated to such powerful feelings of impotent narcissistic rage, to the point that they would be willing to physically destroy their imagined enemies if they could, but resist or ignore these impulses since they are either not able or not willing to suffer the consequences of such actions that they fantasize about. Since people suffering from resentment of some other persons are forced by fear of actual physical or military or intellectual dominance, they are forced to repress this rage, which eventually is expressed which eventually comes out in pressure cooker style, in words and deeds drenched in self-deceiving ego defenses and overdetermined delusional systems of words and ideas related to revenge. Barack Obama's administration was a motivating force for these long-term strategies of Euro destruction. The ultimate goal for the 8 years of Obama's presidency was very specifically to erase the European achievement by erasing Europeans, not by military genocide, but by interbreeding them out of existence, a project that the United Nations has included in its official definition of genocide. Barack Obama's personal fantasies of revenge mirror the secret dream fantasies of all Negroes in America, which has been voiced publicly by masses of progressive socialist DNC types, leftist and communist leaders and strategists. If you intermix the races to the point where there are no longer any race distinctions, then there's nobody to point to the invention of the telephone and say, wow, Europeans invented the telephone. What did you Africans invent to compare? Or wow, Europeans invented spaceflight or discovered spaceflight. What did you Asians invent to compare? And etc. This is a sickness that is highly contagious and is spreading, as would be expected, to all non-Caucasian, non-European races and ethnicities, and to American whites who suffer from severe liberalism, which is not a political orientation anymore, but a legitimate psychological disorder, fit for inclusion in future revisions of the DSM-5 or 6, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the standard diagnostic reference tool for psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, social workers, and others of the clinical dispensation, unconsciously designed specifically to palliate and self-medicate for feelings of guilt and self-disgust over the fact that they no longer believe in any God and no longer believe in any authentic morality or moral system, and are strategically employing a plastic pseudo-morality justified and buttressed by the idea of sticking up for and supporting the underdog as part of their overall self-medication strategy. Negroes today, in America and throughout the world, and non-whites in general, and women and homosexuals and other groups, repress resentment toward Caucasian European society and culture for what they perceive as its superiority. I'm not saying that I believe Negroes are inferior, nor am I saying that I do not believe they're inferior. What I'm saying is that they feel inferior, and you, regardless of who you are out there, believe they are inferior, and our Negroes do too. It's irrelevant whether or not blacks are inferior to whites. At their deepest, darkest subconscious depths, and even more shallow than that, even more close to the surface, they believe they are inferior. It is branded into their subconscious racial memory and collective unconsciouses. They cannot escape from the historical cum psychological fact that they were made slaves by Caucasian Europeans, while Europeans weren't enslaved by anybody, but especially not by Africans. The facts that fuel their sense of inferiority. It's a hard, harsh reality to try to come to terms with, and so far they have failed to come to terms with it, and are now making it much worse by piling on complex ideas of denialism, rationalization, and other defense mechanisms, which will only make any future racial psychotherapy that much more difficult. The psychocultural damage from a heritage of slavery is permanent. No people, no ethnic group, no racial group can overcome a legacy of slavery. Look at my people, the Jews. We actually celebrate our legacy of slavery and have holidays to reminisce about it. But our celebrations are mere attempts at reaction formation, and we have been a destructive influence on Western civilization ever since that event, because of our feelings of inferiority, which motivated our deep-seated desire for revenge against the Greeks, the Romans, the Germans, the Spaniards, and the West in general, the European West in general. This is the black predicament today, and this is what all the sum total of fuss is about. Reparations movements, removal movements, speech codes movements, and political correctness in general, affirmative action schedules, diversity premiums, university and workplace quotas, attacks against the framers and founding fathers like Thomas Jefferson, with pseudo-moral resentment, revenge-motivated accusations of slavery support, and on and on. They are in denial, as are their allies and supporters on the left, but the truth manages to seep through cracks in these defense mechanisms eventually and consistently. The idea that all civilizations, cultures, societies are equal is a rationalization which not one of its perpetrators believes for a nanosecond. They are forgetting some things they never knew in the first place. These retards know nothing about the history of science, intellectual history in general, legal, religious, moral, or political history. Nothing about the development of Western art or art in general, music, architecture. They are the great nihilists, know nothing, postmodern, postmortem masses, the American herd, our nation's cow and cattle people. All the talk about white supremacy is diversionary. The fact of the matter is that every single person on this planet is a white supremacist, most particularly non-whites, regardless of the verbally violent denials they will voice upon hearing this hypothesis. After such denials are voiced, the air will clear and they will be forced to look around them and will be faced with the facts. Everything they own, everything they value, millions more achievements and accomplishments they're too ignorant to know about or comprehend were all created, by CEMs, Caucasian European males. You are a liar if you pretend not to be a white supremacist. The fact that all the non-whites around the world are trying to sneak into or force their way into white countries, and conversely, no whites have any desire to live in non-white countries, is powerful evidence that cannot be explained away. They secretly realize that they are living in a fantasy world if they claim, at the very least, that white cultures and societies are not superior and supreme. Negro feelings of inferiority. Every action and behavior of Negroes in America has a subtext, and that subtext reads, how do I stop feeling inferior to whites? Black Lives Matter, cries of racism, using the race card, the term people of color, claims of white privilege, complaints of white supremacy, removal of Confederate monuments, the Black Hebrew, Black Israelite sect, groups promoting revisionist histories of ancient Egyptian societies, black supremacists and Afrocentrist groups, and on, are all desperate but failed attempts to create and or buttress black individual and racial self-esteem, and thereby to mask Negro self-hatred. Negroes suffer from self-esteem starvation, as do many other groups in society, including feminist women, homosexualities, Jews, other non-whites, Pakis, and etc., because they believe whites are superior and that European civilization is superior to their own, to whatever extent they ever achieved civilization in the first place. What specifically have Negroes contributed to European civilization, scientifically, artistically, intellectually, spiritually, culturally? Basically three things: jazz, the blues, and the peanut. Now, I love the blues, and I sing and play the blues myself whenever I am not forcing a taste of reality onto my fellow species members. I was raised on jazz and loved it since I was 12. And I grew up listening to China Vallis in Miami on FM radio. And I like peanut butter immensely. But how does this compare with the cultural achievements of Caucasian European civilization? It doesn't. Nothing compares with the achievements, accomplishments, explorations, discoveries, and inventions of CEMs, Caucasian European males. Fact. I don't even have to say it, because even people who know absolutely nothing about intellectual or cultural history, or history in general, which everybody pretty much, knows this reality. We would have to travel outside of our solar system to find civilizations as culturally and intellectually advanced as that of Europe, advanced over its neighbors and competitors on its planet. European men have studied the heavens and the stars. They learned to navigate from the stars. They invented tools like the sextant and the concept of maps to assist them in their navigations. Motivated by the Faustian impulse to know, to discover, to seek out, to overpower, and to overcome, consumed by heroic curiosity, daring death and danger, they explored and mapped the entire globe and discovered for the rest of humanity the fact that it is a globe in the first place. Most of the third world peoples in the world today, who are overpopulating the world today, only exist at all because of European discoveries in microbiology, genetics, epidemiology, medicine, irrigation and food production, social organization, and economic logic. No other cultures, societies, civilization on Earth had anything whatsoever to do with these discoveries, inventions, or accomplishments. None. Well, a little bit here and there, but not much. The pathetic mindset of the American cow and cattle people. Censorship of Confederate monuments and the removal of the Confederate flag from public view is not going to decrease the poverty level of American blacks. It is not going to decrease black unemployment in this country. It is not going to create training programs to help blacks obtain respectable careers that will provide a living wage for them and their families. Sorry. It is not going to help save the black family or decrease the epidemic of one-parent families, in other words, black mothers, in the black subculture. It is not going to help black people to learn to respect themselves for being black and not hate themselves for not being white. It is not going to raise black literacy rates. It is not going to increase high school graduation rates of black students. And most of all, it is not going to reverse the legacy of black failure in this society. All it will do is make the misery worse for black people in America. You have been warned. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. The reality that non-white peoples around the world are not yet strong enough spiritually and psychologically to face is that without white European men, they would all be living in grass huts in Africa or Indonesia eating raw rat meat steaks. That is the reality. Thank you for listening.